Alright, what's up guys? So I'm going to do something a little bit different today. I had the privilege, I think we call it a privilege, of being discussed on a podcast, the Cucumber Talks podcast. I was Googling myself because of my massive ego and stumbled across this podcast where three guys kind of dissected and discussed my ideas, specifically my ideas on honesty and my ideas on coaching. And this is the first time I've ever had people kind of unbiasedly discuss me without me being aware and then publishing that. I've had people hate me on the internet publicly, but not this kind of rational discussion where they both agreed and disagreed and so on. And I was fascinated. I listened to the whole thing. And they had some questions for me that they wanted me to answer. So I'm going to answer those questions now. There's 4 of them. Does someone always need a coach? Does self-development keep you trapped and feeling not good enough? As in, shouldn't we just accept who we are? Do I really believe that everything is just mind over matter? And is there such a thing as a better way to live? So I'll be answering those today. So first question, does someone always need a coach? Depending on how you word this question, first thing I'll tackle is no one ever needs a coach. Okay. Coaching is definitely a luxury item. You can go through your entire life without ever being coached and you'll survive just fine. You might not have the best available life, but you'll have an all right one. Coaching, in terms of, people call it life coaching. I never call what I do life coaching because I just hate that term. I call it confidence coaching or integrity coaching. Whatever you want to call it, it's really quite similar to sports coaching. You can be an athlete and play sports all your life without being coached, but you're never going to be in the Olympics. Coaching is about high performance and whatever it is that you want to work on. Now, I don't actually get coaching all the time. I get coaching about once a year. I don't mean one session, but I go through like one program per year, usually somewhere in the realm of 3 months, and usually quite specific on something I want to learn. So for example, last year I went through a mentorship program on how to run groups and things like that. And this year I did a group coaching program for coaches with Rich Litvin. Quite often I do group coaching, but I've had about 4 or 5 one-to-one coaches over the years, and I usually have about 1 per year for about 3 months. And then the rest of the time I'm on my own, but I'm doing other education. I'm doing online courses or reading and so on. So does someone always need a coach? No, I don't always have a coach myself. However, does someone need a coach to make the best of their life? Absolutely. I wouldn't be in this job if I didn't believe that. And this isn't just a biased thing where, I believe in my own thing. I became a coach when lots of other career options were available to me because of how strongly I believe in the power of coaching. The way I always talk about it is I did about 7 years worth of self-development on my own without any real support. Maybe a couple of online courses and some books, but mostly just trial and error by myself. The amount of progress I made in that 7 years was the equivalent to the amount of progress I made in the next 3 months with a coach. It was an accelerator, and that's how I always talk about coaching as an accelerator. You can do it on your own. No, that's not fair. Some people can't do it on their own. I've got to be honest about that. I have some clients who have social anxiety and nice guy syndrome, and they've been suffering miserably from that despite their best efforts for decades. And I think it's pretty fair to say that they're not really getting anywhere on their own. In fact, they seem to be going further and further down rather than up. Now, there are some people who are constantly going up with or without a coach, and those are the people who never need one and will have a great life with or without one. But they still are going slowly up because on our own, we can only go slowly. Like, you try to teach yourself how to dance without any dance instructors. Look how slow that will go for you, even if you're doing online courses and stuff like that. Without someone there to go, you're putting your foot in the wrong place or your weight transfer is off. you're just going to take a long time to figure out what you're doing wrong because you can't see it. And that's how I feel about coaching. As coaching is somebody who's looking at you objectively, unbiasedly. Well, not unbiased, but they want what's best for you, which is almost no one in your life wants that. They want what's best for themselves. They might pretend they want what's best for you. They might even convince themselves of it. But only a coach who you paid to want what's best for you will ever really have a shot at wanting what's best for you. And they'll watch you doing it and they'll be like, I can see what you're doing. And through our discussions, I know what's best for you. And here's the gap between those two things. And you can't identify that gap by yourself very easily. It's quite hard to have self-awareness about your own blind spot. And that's really what a coach is. I think 90% of coaching is what I call calling out bullshit. I call out the lies that people tell themselves that keep themselves stuck or moving slowly. I can see it, but it doesn't mean that I'm perfect. I need a coach to point out my lies. The reason I only get coaching for about, say, 3 months a year is because the rest of the year I'm working on what came up in the coaching. So, hope that answers the first question. Yes, you can live your whole life without a coach. It won't be an amazing life, but it could be good enough. People have done it millions of times. It's fine. But if you want an Olympic level style of living, whether it's performance in your career or self-confidence or depth of your relationships or just enjoyment of life, if you want to get to Olympic level, then you need a coach. Simple as that. Next question. Does self-development keep you trapped and feeling not good enough? Shouldn't we just accept who we are as we are? This is actually a really good question and a pretty good critique of the self-help movement. See, the problem, I guess, inherent in self-development is as soon as you start, there's this concept of I can always improve, which is just a fancy way of saying I'm not good enough as I am. And a lot of people who approach self-development with this mindset are just constantly miserable because no matter how much progress they make, the joy of it is short-lived because they constantly focused on the next development, which means they're always comparing themselves now to an imagined better version of themselves, which means they always lose. Now, you don't actually have to be a self-development fan to be stuck in this loop. People do this all the time. But let me talk about accepting yourself as you are. There are plenty of people who accept themselves just as they are, and they're lazy and complacent, and they don't take care of their bodies, and their relationships fall apart, and they misspend their money, and they get themselves into all sorts of problems, and they don't take care of their health in the long term. They end up really sick. That's a type of accepting yourself who you are, and that's the I accept being exactly where I'm at with no room for improvement. People who think like that get stuck, and the cost comes long term. You know, this is the reason a lot of my clients are sort of 10 or 20 years into nice guy syndrome, is at some point they go, well, this is just the way I am. Then 20 years later, they're like, fuck, my life is in the toilet. Maybe I should do something about this. Now, that's a very different concept to self-respect, which is I'm doing the best I can. This is as good as it's going to be right now. I'm just a human. This will do. And I think you have to earn that. See, I don't think self-acceptance comes from just looking in the mirror and going, you're good enough no matter what you do. I think that's bullshit. No, you're not. If you're hurting your body and you only have superficial relationships, or you hurt people in relationships, or you're a people pleaser, and your career sucks, like you wouldn't do it for free because your job's so boring, then no, you don't deserve self-respect. You haven't earned it. Okay? Now, all those things could still be true, and you're trying your best to deal with them. Now, that would earn self-respect. You know, we don't make overnight big changes. So if you're working on this stuff and you've got a plan and you're tackling your demons, and this is just currently where you're at in that journey, then yeah, you deserve self-respect. You can accept where you are because it's the best kind of available to you. The key to working on yourself without getting trapped in the not good enough loop is a combination, is walking a fine line between identifying what needs to be worked on and appreciating what's going well. And it's actually this constant kind of disruption that keeps you moving forward while enjoying your life. And it is absolutely possible. I think the most specific way to word it is you're constantly, every day, trying to live with integrity. And every day you rack up wins and losses. And it's kind of like playing a sport. You don't win 50-0 every time you play the game, but you enjoy playing the game even when you lose because there's lessons in the loss. So rather than I must succeed or fail, and therefore self-development is always going to make me feel like I'm failing, you think, I'm going to try my best to live with integrity, and every day is a development of my integrity. So every day I'm trying something new or working on a weaker area, but also I know that this is the best I can do. And the fact that I'm doing this work is awesome. So overall, I think self-acceptance needs to be earned. You know who you should be trying to be. And so if you're not putting that effort in, no, you don't get to look in the mirror and go, that's good enough. The third question was, do I really believe it's all mind over matter? So in the podcast, they talked about the impression they got of me is that I think that anything that's difficult in your life is simply a matter of cognition. It's a matter of your mind. And therefore you have total control over whether or not you suffer or how well you do in something to that extent. What I'd say is that I generally believe in, I think it's a concept that Jim Rohn came up with. Life is 10% of what happens to you and 90% of how you react to it. That's what I believe. I don't exclude the effects of the external world on my brain. Okay. If people are being nasty to me or things don't go the way they're supposed to or whatever, that is going to have an effect on me, and I can't prevent that from having an effect on me. I'd have to be highly psychopathic to be completely unaffected by the outside world. I'll give you an example of how this belief plays out. A few years ago, I got kicked out of the Czech Republic because I screwed up my visa. Actually, the people doing the visa made the mistake. They weren't supposed to kick me out, but it's what happened. I got kicked out. Now, I don't believe there is a human on the planet that can be unfairly and unexpectedly, shockingly torn away from their home and their loved one and left homeless without having a reaction to that. Okay. I don't care how confident you are, that's going to bum you out. So that's the 10%. Not only the event, but your initial emotional reaction. That's out of your control. However, what happens next is going to be different from person to person. And that's the bit we do control, or at least the bit we could control if we learn the tools. Which is one of the reasons I advocate for coaching, is coaching helps you to learn how to manage that 90% better. See, what I did is a mixture. First off, I raged and ranted against the decision. I tried making lots of phone calls and getting lawyers involved and everything to prevent me getting kicked out of the country. That was me just not reacting well. That was me trying to control something that's out of my control. That was a choice. That left me miserable for about a week. So the first couple of hours after we got the news, you could say that misery was on account of the external world. That was out of our control to have that initial grief shock reaction. But me suffering for the next week, being all stressed out and depressed and struggling, that was me. That wasn't the situation. Because at some point at the end of that following week, I came to a place of acceptance. I went, this is out of my control. This is an opportunity to explore the United Kingdom, reconnect with my cousin who lives there, meet some clients that I've never met face to face, and work on my whatever, this, that, and the other, and do some problem solving and deal with the situation in a way that lives according to my values. Once I made that choice, my suffering dropped away almost completely. And I think people failing to make that choice is where they suffer. Yes, life is hard, and there are some things that are objectively, I guess you'd say it's objectively reasonable to say that's a bad thing that happened. Serious sickness and injury, loss of a loved one, disruption, massive disruption to your career or your living situation, mental illness. There are a lot of things that happen to you that you really couldn't have stopped, and your initial reaction to them is as little under your control as the thing itself. But once you've realized that it's happened, and once you've realized what your initial reaction is, now the ball's in your court. And I absolutely believe with the right coaching, philosophical training, education, psychological development, you can get really good at managing that 90% so that your suffering is as minimal, as a human can experience. So when I say it's mind over matter, what I'd say is it's mind over reaction. But even still, a caveat on top of all of this. While I say some things that happen to you are objectively bad, it's not too hard to come up with a comparison that puts them into perspective. So you could say, yeah, oh my God, getting ripped out of your home and away from your family unexpectedly and thrown into another country, that's awful. Well, what about being a child soldier in Sierra Leone? Isn't that a tad worse? What about, I went to Cairo a couple of years ago. That's poverty. These people wished that they were getting deported from the Czech Republic to the UK. They were getting deported from one pile of rubble to another even worse pile of rubble with no food. And seeing stuff like that really makes me think, did anything bad even really happen to me? So sometimes when it comes to that concept of mind over matter, I often think the things that we think matter are a perspective. And what I mean by that is we make things matter. Everything's actually neutral. Nothing's really that bad. And we make it bad with our beliefs and with our shock and our lack of expectation for things going wrong and so on. So I'll just add that in there. Hopefully that clarifies something. Last question. Is there really a better way to live objectively? So right at the end of the podcast, I think there's a bit of a debate about whether someone can really say you're living good or bad, or that one way of living is better than the other. Where I stand on this is really similar to Sam Harris's model of the moral landscape, which is there's lots of different ways for good and there's lots of different ways for bad. Now he's talking about in terms of morals, but I think this could be extended to concepts of living and well-being. There are lots of good ways to live that are quite different from each other, and any one of them is great, especially if it suits you. And then there are lots of bad ways to live, and they're all bad, and none of them will suit you. So for example, I do believe that being an athlete with a loving family who tends a garden on the weekend is a better way to live than being a homeless drug addict who joins a gang, right? These are quite extreme examples, but to give you a sense, like, there's almost nothing you could say to convince me that the homeless drug addict joining the gang is living in any way better than the athlete with the loving family who plays in his garden. Now, those are lifestyles. I think the question was more about the way to live. And I do have strong opinions on that. For example, I think it's objectively truthful to say it's better to live honestly than dishonestly. And I'm not just talking from a moral viewpoint here. My next book coming out, The Naked Truth, goes into detail about the evidence supporting this claim. This isn't even that hard to measure. Find someone who's generally truthful with people most of the time. Have a look at the quality of that person's relationships. And find someone who's full of shit most of the time and have a look at the quality of their relationships. I promise you it'll be like this. I promise you the person over here is having worse relationships than the honest person over here. The same applies to career, the same applies to psychology, almost every category of life you can think of. The person who's consistently been honest and open and upfront about who they are, what they're thinking, what they're feeling, is going to have better, all other things equal, they're going to be doing better, objectively. Quality of life, enjoyment, confidence, whatever you want to measure is better than the person who's been full of shit, deceptive, manipulative, lying, hiding the truth, hiding from themselves, lack of self-awareness, all the various forms of dishonesty. So yes, I do think there are objectively better ways to live. I don't believe there's a way. In fact, I think each individual has a way that they need to discover and create. So one way to look at it is you have different ways to live, and some are better than the others. So you can live by your values and have a better life than not living by your values. You know, if you live by your values, eventually, once the dust clears from the transition, if you haven't been living by them, your career will be something that suits you and you'll enjoy going into work. It won't even matter if you're getting paid or not. You'll love it so much. And you'll only connect with people who are good with you, and you'll push away people who are bad for you. So your relationships in your social circle will be healthy and encouraging. And you'll be reducing your own shame and lack of self-awareness, so you'll know who you are. You'll have a sense of purpose and meaning and confidence. And if you've been living a lie, which I did for many years, your relationships will be superficial, shallow, chaotic, and conflicting. Your self-confidence will be in the fucking toilet because you don't even know who you are anymore. And you're constantly shaming yourself by hiding who you are. So you're your own worst critic, and the not good enough stories are pounding in your fucking head all the time, right? Your career will be something that you do to impress other people, and you hate it. And if someone gave you $1 million, you would quit, but no one's ever going to do that. So you're stuck at this shithole, and on and on. So long story short, yes, there are better ways to live, objectively speaking. And I'm really calling out this one quite strongly because I think people use this argument to avoid working on themselves. They say, like, you can't tell me that the way I'm living is right or wrong. I decide for myself, which is really code for, I don't want to deal with all the uncomfortable stuff in my life that needs to change. So I'm going to kind of intellectualize my way out of this. It's the same type of argument that people bring up around honesty. They'll throw these extreme hypotheticals at me to kind of prove that there is a reason or there is a argument for dishonesty. You know, the classic one I heard once was like, well, what if it's Nazi Germany and you're hiding Jews in the basement and the Nazis ask you if you got any Jews? You know, would you tell the truth? I'm like, when's that going to happen? It's not that time. That's not what's happening to you. And that's not an excuse to lie about how you feel to your partner or to pretend to your boss or all the other things that you're actually doing, the real life situations, you know. So I will challenge you guys. Some of these questions have a sense of, how do I get out of facing the uncomfortable truths about myself that need to be dealt with? You know, it's intellectualizing something that's really kind of caveman practical simple. You got some shit you need to sort out. We all do. And there's no way to intellectualize your way out of that. You can't argue from some deep philosophical perspective that there's no such thing as shit to sort out, because we just know there is. It's as simple as that, you know. Anyway, thank you guys so much for doing that podcast. And for being both honest but fair as well. You know, like I said, the only times people have talked about me in content behind my back has been really like brutal and quite unfair and just full of hate. You guys were not full of agreement, but you were also pretty kind and considerate. And even the stuff you were guessing about me was pretty accurate. And your assumptions about how I would view things, they were pretty accurate. I was quite impressed with that, you know. So if you enjoyed that, please subscribe to the YouTube channel, share it around. And if you have any questions of your own for me, get in touch, dan@brojo.org. I'll see you guys next time.